Welcome to 101 with Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. I'm LORNA VIRGILI. Sir, welcome back. This is our first show of 2012. However, we're looking into 2013 already. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted
Did you have
to
a
be
good
back.
end of the new year?
I certainly did. It was very, very good, and I spent a lot of time with family. Spent a lot of money, unfortunately, but it turned out very well.
All right. Well, looking forward into 2012, and I just mentioned 2013. The year started very busy here in Montgomery County, and just a few days ago, you presented your capital budget to the County Council. Can you give us a little bit of the highlights of that particular budget, which is what, approximately $4.21 billion?
Right. Let me first of all explain what the capital budget is for those who are not familiar with it. This is not the operating budget. This is the capital budget designed to pay for items and construct items such as libraries, schools, recreational centers, government centers, community centers, and a variety of other things that we have. Long-term construction projects, which is different from the operating budget, which are the facilities, the people therein, which we operate in that vein. We have a 6-year budget, and we adjust it annually with a 2-year major adjustment therein. And what I've presented so far is a $4.2 billion 6-year capital budget. That budget is slightly less than what had been projected because we reduced that about 7% in terms of the bond funding available. We have had a projection of about $320 million for bond funding. We brought that number down to 295, and so it's like a $25 million per year reduction per year. What that means is that there are fewer dollars available for projects. We also had a change in the impact tax to defer part of that, and so there's another $20 million reduction in that as well. So when you look at the budget today, it is by about 7% less than we've had in the previous years, which means that we can do less, and we've had to scale back some projects to defer some. But having said that, we maintain the top priority for us, which is the school budget. And in the school budget, we only have a 0.03% reduction, which is basically a standstill budget. But if you have to combine that, though, with what had happened the prior 2 years, we've had a significantly higher increase in school construction. And so what we're simply saying, we're not going to increase the increase, but simply maintain a level of funding for school projects for the next, at least for the next year, and hopefully be able to ramp it back up if things get better in the long term.
Now, when it comes to school, maintaining that budget for the already approved modernization schedule for some elementary schools, to open 2 new elementary schools, 1 middle school, and then construct 6 elementary and 1 middle school addition. In addition to that, what else goes in there? It seems like a whole lot for the next 6 years. Does this cover the minimum necessary?
Well, let me go back on the schools now, because we are providing some additional space for elementary schools and for 1 middle school. And we will hold back on some future modernization, but there are 2 schools in this CIP that we are delaying for an additional year. Keep in mind that it costs almost $100 million, if not in excess of $100 million, for a modernization of a high school. For us to do that would mean that we'd have to either crowd something else out in order to make room for that, and that becomes very difficult. So yes, we're doing a great deal on the addition sides and for modernizations for the ongoing projects at the elementary and at the middle school level. But at the high school, there are some delays, and that's unfortunate. We hope that we can, in the future years, get that back on the pace, but right now, that's a real difficulty. In addition to schools now, there are fire stations, there are recreational centers, there are government centers, there are libraries, of course. All of those things go into the overall capital budget. And when you look at it overall for the 4 years, it's about $4.2 billion, a fairly significant budget.
Where is the money going to come from?
Well, a good part of it comes from borrowing, and we're going to borrow a little bit less because if you take into consideration the indebtedness that we've accumulated for borrowing to build the schools, the roads, the bridges, and all the other things that we've looked at, if you looked at just simply indebtedness, behind public schools overall in our operating budget, indebtedness is the 2nd highest item. And we have to make sure that we keep that at a sustainable level. And if we continue to increase that, I think it would create some real problems for us. It therefore would crowd out monies that we need to do other things in the operating budgets. You don't want to get to a situation where you build so many projects that you can't operate them because you no longer have the operating funds to do so. And it potentially impacts us in terms of our rating position on Wall Street. So in my opinion, we need to slow it down just a little bit, but keep in mind, the slowdown is a slowdown from a significant increase which we've had for the last 2 years.
When you're talking indebtedness, let's explain a little bit more about it. You're talking about $196 million almost that the county has to pay every year as the county's mortgage per se, right?
Yeah. It's the same thing if you go out and you buy a house today and you have a mortgage on that house and you look at the amount that you're paying for your mortgage and you look at it for the county government, the amounts that we are paying for indebtedness behind public schools are the highest items in that entire budget.
When it comes to public safety, what does this capital improvement budget recommend?
Well, there are a number of things. First of all, it allows us to purchase and to maintain a very good operating system in terms of radio communications. We have a significant advance in that, probably about $50 million to enhance our radio communications. It would also allow us to construct the 2nd District Police Station in Bethesda and continue the funding going forward for the 3rd station in Silver Spring. There are a couple of stations that we've looked at that we don't have to do right now, that is the 5th and 6th, because one involves some environmental concerns and the other we have some pretty good lease arrangements therein. But this would allow us to lease to build 2 new stations. Also on public safety, it will allow us to complete construction on the Glenmont and Wheaton stations, the relocation, Aspen Hill as well. And so we are able to keep those on pace as well.
We're talking about capital improvement budget. When it comes to affordable housing, what did you include on it as a recommendation?
It's about $23 million for affordable housing. That's less than what I would have wanted. I would want to probably double that amount, but the more you put there, the more you put in affordable housing, the less you would have for roads, the less you'd have for schools and other things. And you get to a point where you simply cannot do it all. This budget, overall, the capital budget is reduced by about 7%. And so for schools to maintain a level of funding that is consistent with what they received last year, I think is a fairly major accomplishment. It demonstrates where our priorities are.
All right, we're going to take a small break and then we're going to talk about a little bit about the operational budget, which is not released yet, but it's another $4 billion that we're going to talk about. So we're going to be right back with Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. Don't go away. Welcome back to 101 with Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. I'm LORNA VIRGILI. Right before the break, we were talking about the capital improvement budget that you just released. Now let's talk about the budget, operational budget for Montgomery County. That will be released in the month of March 15th. But during the month of January, you went around all over the county, public forums, talking and listening to county residents. Before you talk to us about this particular budget that you're working on, what's been the feedback from county residents regarding the budget?
I think it's been very good. I think people understand that we've made a terrific effort of getting out and talking to people, explaining to them how we construct the budget, what are the major items they're in, what are the funding sources, what we spend for, and we've received a great deal of input from them about what are the priorities. This is something that I've done every year, and we do 5 or 6 of these every year. This is probably more than all previous county executives have done in the history of this county. In fact, very few have ever done this at all, not just 6 in 1 year, but some have never done it at all. But it's invaluable too, I think, because it allows us to talk directly to the citizens at a time that they can have an input before I actually create the budget. Keep in mind that about 97–98% of everything that we place in the budget is ultimately adopted by the council. There's little separation between what is recommended and what is ultimately adopted. Therefore, if you want to have an input, you should try to get that input as soon as possible into the original creation of that budget, that is at this level. Then you can go before the county council and continue to argue and make that case for what you think is in the budget and what we've left out of the budget. So you get really 2 bites at the apple here, one before the county executive, before the budget is actually created, and one before the county council, once that recommendation go before the county council as well. But I've received a great deal of feedback. I enjoy the interaction with our citizens, and we have a lot of citizens who participate and provide tremendous feedback. We heard a great deal about the libraries, about health and human services, about recreational centers, about public safety, and you name it across the board. People come in these sessions, they are well informed, they have a perspective about what the priorities should be, about our funding sources, and I think that they now really respect the fact that we get out and have these yearly engagements on the budget in the fashion that we do.
So what does the fiscal landscape look like for FY13? Was there, you mentioned about $100 million gap?
Yes, $100 million is relatively different and smaller than what we've had in the previous years. Keep in mind that we've, in the 4 years thus far, we've closed better than 4.2 in budgetary gaps. 1 year alone was almost $1 billion. Last year was well over $300 million. This year we're looking at just over $100 million, and of that number, we think that we could come up with a plan to adjust to that. But it's going to be challenging because we've exercised an awful lot of options over the last 4 years in order to get to this point, and many of those options are no longer on the table. We eliminated or reduced substantially COLAs for our employees, cost of living adjustment. We furloughed personnel. We reduced approximately 1,400 positions in county government. We've changed our health and our retirement benefit plans, and we've made a large number of cuts and basically eliminated a lot of programs and positions throughout county government. It's hard to continue to do that, and when you have $100 million, it seems small, but the options are also fewer, and therefore we have to work aggressively to make sure that we balance everything in an appropriate manner. The balance for me, and let me make this point, in terms of the priorities, first of all, public education, public safety, and help for the most vulnerable within our community. Those are the priorities that I started with.
Where do you foresee these cuts are going to come from? Have you asked the departments to come across the board with a certain percentage of reduction?
Well, first of all, we're looking at approximately 1% change across county agencies in total. That doesn't mean that each agency will receive a 1% reduction. That's where we start. It is my expectation that at a minimum we could have a standstill budget this year and not have the 5, 10, and 15% reductions that we've had in the last few years. Again, that's a huge reduction on top of several years of reductions that we've had going back for the last 3 or 4 years. I believe that it is possible for us to come forward with a budget that at least places us in a position where we're not doing any additional major reductions at this point in time, but to simply reflect and hold steady where we currently stand, which, relatively speaking from previous budget, is a substantial lower level of expenditures.
You've listened to county residents, you're working on the budget, you've asked agencies to do the reductions, but next is the county council. New leadership within the council itself, so what do you foresee coming from the other side of the street?
Well, I think we share the general same priorities. I think that people understand that the same priorities in terms of public safety, education, and helping the most vulnerable are the same priorities that we both share. There may be some differences, but I think the differences are on the margin. I think, for example, that we have to be sure that we maintain our AAA bond rating and not do things that will jeopardize that. I think that we need to look not just for the current year, but we need to think budget strategically, what it looks like not only now, but for the foreseeable future and years to come. And that's where I think that we get into some differences. I think that in the past, I've advocated for a lower level of expenditures, cuts and reductions at different times, believing that we need to be a little bit more prudent and even a little bit more conservative as we look for the future, because many of these things can have a lasting impact on us, and I think that we need to keep that fact in mind. And if you take that approach, then I think that better position us to help provide the programs and services that our county really, really needs, and to respond to the challenges of our county employees in terms of how we are treating them. But if we start to make imprudent cuts, or we start to make increases in our budgets that are not sustainable, it gets us right back into the problems and challenges that we've had in years past. And I don't want to do that, and I think we maintain this pace. We'll come out of this, and I think we are coming out of this much stronger as a county.
Legislative priorities, not only here within Montgomery County, but also across the state in Annapolis. The session, you've spoken with the governor, you're probably in touch with him on a regular basis. The state's budget could surprise us here in Montgomery County, but what are your legislative priorities for Annapolis this year?
Well, the big priority for us are several. Number one, education. We have to make certain that we ensure that education is the top of the list. Second to that is transportation. We have a fairly large number of projects in our county that are really transportation dependent. If we are not able to move those projects forward, it will adversely affect the ability of the county to improve our economic situation going forward.
We're going to take another small break, and we'll be right back with Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett talking about everything that we started the year with, 2012. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 101 with Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. As we were talking, it's been quite a busy year. Generally, it's like that at the beginning of the year. But January 1st, the new bag tax law came into effect in Montgomery County. And you were walking the county distributing those reusable bags to county residents. What's been the feedback from the public? And I'm sure you've also received some of those emails and letters of people that have been not so happy about the 5 cent per bag. What's been the feedback overall?
I think overall very good. When you make a major change such as this to have a bag tax, it is an adjustment. And so you will have some people who are resistant to the adjustment. The first thing that we have to make certain that people understand that this is not designed as a revenue enhancement. We get very, very little money as a result of this bag fee. We think that in years to come, after the first year, we maybe get about $1 million. After that, we anticipate about $250,000. So keep in mind, we have a $4.4 billion budget, and $250,000 is relatively small in comparison to that. But the real purpose here is to enhance the water quality in Montgomery County, to clear up our streams, our roadsides, to reduce that $3.3 million that we're paying now to simply pick up trash and to deal with all the challenges that we have today. And I think people are responding favorably. There are some people who write us or email us who indicated that they have a challenge with this and they'd rather pay the fee or decide that they won't shop at our stores. But, you know, let's be realistic. You're going to save 5 or 10 cents on a couple of bags and drive 5 or 10 miles away to burn up a half a tank of gas to save 5 cents. I think it's a little bit overreactive. But overall, I think it's been fairly well received. And it's adjustment. I mean, I even got caught up in the adjustment. I keep bags in my car, and whenever I go in to shop, and normally I was doing this before we even had the bag tax. But just last weekend, I was in my wife's car, and she did not have the bags. At least I couldn't find them in her car. I had ordered some food at a restaurant nearby, and I was going by to pick it up, and I arrived at the restaurant and realized I didn't have my bag to put all the items in. So I had to make a choice. I said, God, do I drive all the way back home, which was a 3-mile trip back and forth, and spend maybe a gallon of gas doing that? Or do I, you know, succumb to my worst fear and pride and go in and pay this 5 cents to get this food and, you know, pay for this bag that I did? So I went in, and sure enough, the proprietor saw me and said, "You don't have your bag, Mr. Leggett, so I'm going to charge you the 5 cents." So it was a warning to me. So I went back home and I said, I'm going to make sure that I place bags in my wife's car just in case this incident occurs in the future. But I can understand that. But it's
guilty here.
Yeah,
as
guilty
well.
here on that.
Guilty here as well.
Yeah.
And the back of my car right now, it's like I'm a bag lady. But hey, I live in Montgomery County,
Yeah.
and we're all helping the environment. Feedback from the retailers, and have we started collecting any funds quite yet? Because there was a percentage that they needed to sell before
Right.
they submitted funds back to the county.
One of the things we wanted to do is not to make this such a huge administrative burden for the retailers. And so we said that you needed to collect it at a certain period of time and periodically report it in. I think once you get to $100 or at a certain period of time that you would report, but not every day, not every instant that you would turn in 5 cents. Otherwise, it becomes such an administrative burden that you lose the cooperation and respect of our retailers. But overall, you know, I go into the store, and I see large numbers of people. Virtually everybody in the store I was at yesterday had a bag when they walked in the store. I only saw one person without a bag, and they were complaining. But overall, I think the people inside were coming in with their bags.
Now, let me ask you this. There was one store, I'm not saying which one, and you cannot twist my arm, but I went and they told me we're not charging for the bags quite yet. Is there's going to be oversight over these? I mean, it is the law, but over retailers that so far are not quite charging the 5 cents?
Yes, we need to make certain that everyone is in compliance, and it's rare that we've heard of someone not compliant. And we will make certain that people are complying with the law, because you have to obey the law here in Montgomery County and charge at the point of sale.
Let's change the topic a little bit. We wrapped up the year with Montgomery County acquiring 13 green buses, part of the ARA funds, and they'll be part of the fleet for Ride-On as well. Is this the future? Is this the way the county is going to go as far as their buses is going to be?
Well, Montgomery County is already going in that direction. We had hybrid vehicles long before many others in the region have had those. And this is a continuation in that our funds allows us to, in fact, invest sooner than we otherwise would have in terms of changing our fleet. We hope to have for all of our fleet, all of our buses in the foreseeable future, that they'll be running on clean fuel. This is the way of the future. Montgomery County has started. It's just a question for us of how soon we get to that point.
Did you mention, or am I mistaken, in one of the past forums that there are a certain amount of buses that you wish that would be replaced?
Yeah, we've had some challenges with so-called champion buses. Just recently we had one of the buses to catch fire. We're fortunate that there was no incident in terms of the public safety with the bus. But it's an area that we are, in fact, in our CIP, we have a purchase of 39 additional buses, and as soon as we can, we'll ultimately change the entire fleet. But there's a rotation period at which you have to do that in any event, and our fleet is getting old, and so we have to make certain that we maintain the level of replacement where the buses are efficiently maintained on our streets.
Recently we celebrated during Martin Luther King Memorial Day with a day of service in Montgomery County. What was the response of the citizens in the county? 3 locations where people could serve, volunteer hours. You want to send a message to county residents, because apparently they did come out in force and
oh
served.
yes, this was a real success, and my hats off to our volunteer center, Office of Community Partnership, and Bruce Adams and his entire team, and all of them that organized these 3 events simultaneously almost. University of Maryland Shady Grove Center, at the Civic Center in Silver Spring, and a huge one at the Bethesda Conference Center right in Rockville. All of those turned out to be quite successful, and large numbers of people are out volunteering, working in the county.
And the celebration itself, the musical tribute at Strathmore,
yes,
it was quite an emotional journey.
Yeah, it really was, and it was a real treat, and we have to continue that pace and continue the performances and the tribute to Dr. King in a way that I think makes this county really proud of how we've displayed that and bringing so many people together.
One of the most amazing things was actually the fact that a lot of the performers were young people from our community.
Oh yeah, and that's what they've strived to try to get the entire community involved, young people, and to have diverse people participating and groups participating in the celebration. And so you would see the great diversity of Montgomery County, both in terms of age and diversity and ethnicity and languages and all of those things coming together in order to ensure that we have appropriate celebration of Dr. King's holiday.
Well, Mr. Leggett, thank you so much for joining us again. Many blessings for you for the new year, and it's been quite a first month of 2012. Lots of things happening in Montgomery County as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching. Any information regarding Montgomery County as well as the capital budget, just visit montgomerycountymd.gov. I'm LORNA VIRGILI, and thank you for watching.